Boy, when I'm tired, I can't concentrate. I can't put things together in my mind. I'm really afraid I'm losing it. I just don't know what I'm going to do.
With cell phones in our cars, beepers in our pockets, and faxes in our homes, we are working more, resting less, and feeling dead tired.
When I'm on 2 nights in a row, I want to do as little as possible. The nurses kid me that I crawl into a corner when I'm tired. I become a monster. And I know it. I get more explosive, more irritable. Basically, I'm ashamed of how nasty I am.
Working women and mothers with children are at greatest risk for persistent fatigue. Their work never ends.
What an exhausting day. I'm so tired I don't even want to do this pre-flight. Once I get in the air though, should be able to relax a little bit. Sure hope nothing goes wrong.
Flying or driving while fatigued can be like playing Russian roulette. We are now just beginning to realize the tremendous role fatigue plays in causing accidents.
When life is so busy, I have to work so long hours. I feel so lonely, alienated, and depressed. All I want to do in my free time is sleep. My home life suffers. I have no time for my wife, my children, or my friends. I feel so embarrassed I can't live up to the tradition of the Iron Man.
Fatigue shortens the fuse of life. We are more prone to frustration, anger, and violence. We are exhausted by our work and frazzled by the lack of time. All of us need to seriously re-examine how fatigue is affecting every aspect of our lives. I'm Dr. Fred Harding, your host for this program on fatigue. In the next 40 minutes, we'll explore what fatigue is, why it's so devastating, and how you can break free from its downward drag on your life. No one knows for sure how many of the thousands of patients admitted to the emergency rooms of these hospitals every year are there because of fatigue-related accidents. Statistics and pictures seem so remote until we personally feel their impact. Then we realize that these numbers represent people like you and me. On the eve of a recent holiday, a carload of college students began a 1,000-mile drive home after completing their final exams. They drove through the night, and at 5:30 in the morning, the driver, Andrew Corbett, fell asleep. He ran off of this freeway and smashed into a small parked trailer, which splintered into 1,000 pieces. One of the boards from the trailer came through his windshield and hit his sleeping brother in the eye. The consequences of Andrew's fatigue will haunt him forever.
You know, I wish that I'd been the one who was injured, because every time I see my brother with a black patch on and you know, you can still see the marks of surgery to some degree. Plastic surgeons have done very well, but there still is some facial disfiguration. And every time I see him, you know, I think, why wasn't it me? I was the one who was to blame. And it took me quite a while before I really could accept the fact that for some reason, I don't know why, he was the one that was hurt and I wasn't. But yeah, I mean, I cried a lot about it, and it hurts, even to this day.
Official records show that more than 1,500 people are killed every year in the United States as a result of fatigued drivers falling asleep at the wheel. And this may be only a fraction of the real number, because fatigue and sleepiness are rarely considered in accident investigations. This scene looks like a major disaster. It is actually the aftermath of a bus crash that happened shortly after midnight near Baltimore, Maryland. Most of the 55 passengers aboard were sleeping, and tragically, so was the 35-year-old bus driver. One of the passengers desperately tried to wake him, but it was too late. The bus ran off the freeway, sped along the grass embankment for almost a quarter mile, then crashed into a large sign pole. There were no skid marks, as the driver took no action to avoid the impact. Incredibly, no one was killed, but it took 15 rescue units and 3 medical helicopters to transport the injured. What is most significant about this crash is that there was no evidence of alcohol or other drugs or any form of impairment. The primary cause was human fatigue.
The tragedies we have just seen are real-life examples of the countless human disasters that can be traced directly to simple human fatigue. But fatigue has consequences that are not so obvious, such as the destructive influences on human relationships. In this video, we'll explore these consequences and the steps you can take to survive fatigue in the 90s.
What is fatigue? Fatigue is that awful feeling of being tired, worn out, with barely enough energy to get through the day. Scientists define fatigue as a loss of efficiency, accompanied by a reluctance or a loss of ability to do the work one could normally do with ease and enthusiasm when properly rested. Physicians today say one of the most common complaints from patients is that they feel fatigued, run down, and without energy. These complaints are coming from every sector of our society: students, factory workers, executives, truckers, and mothers. No one seems to be immune from the wear and tear of the pressures and pace of modern life. In fact, this complaint has become so common that we now accept fatigue as a normal part of our lives. But it is far from normal. It is a profoundly abnormal condition that takes a heavy toll on any individual or any society affected by it. Let's look at the causes of our fatigue. At a personal level, there are 3 common reasons for fatigue: long hours of wakefulness, long hours of mental work and stress, and long hours of physical work and activity. In our sedentary society, the first 2 are by far the most common. While fatigue's causes are not particularly profound, its effects are. It's important to understand that at certain times of the day, even when we are well rested, there is a tendency to get sleepy. This is due to our body's natural rhythms. Dr. Alison Smiley of Human Factors North in Toronto, Canada, explains how these rhythms affect our daily activities.
It's basically a physiological cycle where all kinds of functions gear up for action during the day and damp down for sleep and recuperation at night. Heart rate, same thing, blood pressure, urine production, adrenaline production, all kinds of physiological functions have this same rhythm of increase during the day and then damping down at night. And the reason that's important to people like me is that mental alertness also goes along with this physiological change. So not only is your body temperature, heart rate, and so on rising, but mental alertness is following the same rhythm.
Colonel Gregory Belenky heads the Department of Behavioral Biology at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research in Washington, D.C. He has spent much of his career studying the effects of fatigue
on human performance.
You know, really it's directly applicable in terms of industrial accidents, driving safety, transportation issues, and so on. And what you can say is really that people's performance in complex situations such as driving, flying airplanes, and other things will degrade over time with progressive sleep loss. It's important to bear in mind that it is the higher functions that go.
The higher functions that Colonel Belinkie is referring to are judgment, initiative, creativity, forethought, and reason. Functions that are essential in exercising common sense and making good decisions. These higher functions are carried out in the front part of your brain, the frontal lobes. It is precisely in this crucial part of the brain that fatigue has its primary impact. Here's why. Every organ of the body, whether the heart, kidney, lung, or brain, conforms to one principle. The more work done, the more fuel used. The fuel of the brain is glucose, better known as blood sugar. Dr. Belinkie's research actually measured brain glucose usage to determine which areas of the brain are most affected by fatigue. The areas of highest brain activity show up in yellow and red. The areas of lowest activity are depicted in blue.
This is a young person, probably about 25 years old, and this is looking at the brain from the side. This is the person when they were well rested. And this here is after 24 hours without sleep. And you can see by the color coding that the brighter the color, the greater the brain activation, as measured in this case by sugar, glucose metabolism. And what you see is a decrease in metabolism from the rested state to the 24-hour sleep-deprived state. The whole brain is affected. However, it is primarily the frontal regions, the complex cortical association areas that integrate vision, hearing, taste, smell, and touch that are most affected.
The frontal lobes play a vital role in how well the information received from all other parts of the brain is processed. When we are fatigued, that crucial part of brain activity is diminished, and the processing of information from all of our senses, sight, hearing, smell, and touch, dramatically slows down. We may still be able to make accurate decisions, but it will usually take us far longer. The problem comes when there is no extra time to compensate for fatigue. When a tired person must make important decisions quickly, that is when the decision-making process often breaks down. Colonel Belinkie explains.
The problem comes when they're now taking so long to make their accurate decision that the task no longer allows them that time. That the time it takes them exceeds the time allotted. And at that point, they're then forced to guess. And when they're forced to guess, their performance goes to chance levels. So what you see is sudden catastrophic failure in the real world.
This kind of catastrophic failure was vividly demonstrated in a remarkable study done on airline pilots who suddenly faced a simulated emergency while flying a large jetliner. The vertical line represents the level of brainwave activity recorded during the flight. Point A shows the brainwave activity of the rested pilot before takeoff. The activity rises as the plane takes off. It drops as the pilot settles into normal flight. Now at point B, an unexpected problem is introduced. Brainwave activity immediately increases. Notice that once the pilot solved the problem and began to relax, his brainwave activity again declined. Then later in the flight, at point C,
the pilot was suddenly confronted with a life-threatening problem. Abruptly, his brainwave activity shot way up. Once again, the well-rested pilot solved the difficulty and safely landed the plane. Several weeks later, a similar experiment was carried out when the same pilot was fatigued from loss of sleep and long hours of work. The red line now shows the brainwave response of the fatigued pilot. He was able to resolve the minor problem at point B. But when confronted with the major problem, even though his tired brain was able to recognize the crisis, he did not have the capacity to fix it. If the co-pilot had not taken over the controls, his plane would have crashed. Notice, at no time during this flight was his brainwave activity as high as when rested. Roger Baker is manager of aviation safety for the Federal Aviation Administration. He is acutely aware of the serious problems a fatigued pilot faces.
Well, every flight is a series of decisions, and a pilot must be able to make the correct decisions. Fatigue affects the timely decision-making process, and in a time when some circumstance might be out of the ordinary, it's important that the correct decisions be made in a timely manner. And if a pilot is fatigued, they may not make those decisions in a timely manner in order to affect the positive outcome of the flight.
The key point is that when the time available to make a decision is limited, a person who is fatigued may not be able to handle the problem. This principle applies not just to pilots, but to all of us in all aspects of our lives. To perform at our best, to be able to handle crisis situations well, we must be rested. As we become fatigued, our performance declines because our brains become tired. This affects decision-making. It doesn't matter how motivated you are or how good you are at your job. It doesn't matter whether you are an executive, cab driver, machine operator, homemaker, or student. It's not a problem of motivation or psychology. It's a problem of ordinary, inescapable physiology. A tired brain does not function well. For the purpose of preventing casualties during real conflicts, a study was done by the United States Army which looked at sleep loss on personnel of an artillery fire direction center. This was done to better understand the effect of sleep loss on initiative and pre-planning skills. The skills that drive us to do things now in order to save us a lot of trouble later. The Fire Direction Center is a team of 5. In this study, the team was to plot the location of simulated artillery targets as requested by observers.
Oscar 2, Papa 5-1, suppress target 1-8, over.
There were 2 kinds of targets. Pre-planned, where the preparations for firing on the target were made in advance, and immediate, where the target was fired on without delay. They were to continually update their situation map as they plotted new targets, and also make sure that each was not a prohibited target, such as a museum, civilian housing, hospital, or church. As part of the test, the observers would on occasion deliberately call in prohibited targets.
Right 100, add 100, fire for effect.
In the early stages of this exercise, the teams refused to fire on simulated targets identified as being prohibited. However, after 24 hours without sleep, the teams no longer kept up the situation map, nor did they plot the pre-planned targets. As a result, they failed to identify prohibited targets and directed simulated artillery fire at all targets, regardless of their nature. Not having plotted their pre-planned targets, they fell behind and often failed to plot and fire on legitimate targets. They also lost grasp of their position in relation to friendly and enemy units. They no longer knew what they were attempting to fire at.
We too are like the soldiers. As our thinking process is compromised by fatigue, we exercise much less initiative, forethought, and pre-planning. We lose our ability to set priorities and focus our attention on the tasks at hand. We are easily distracted by less important tasks. Events in our environment tend to drive us instead of the other way around. Yet strangely, the tired person does not recognize their performance is compromised.
If they do a systems check, they'll be able to hear, see, feel, touch everything as they would normally. The problem is that they can't put it all together into understanding of what the situation is. Evaluating your own performance is also a higher order cognitive mechanism. That ability also goes, and so you're blissfully unaware of the fact that you're not performing very well.
Fatigue selectively targets and impairs the highest mental functions. A fatigued mind is incapable of thinking efficiently. Even small losses of sleep accumulate and have a negative effect on our performance. A beautiful example of this was shown by a computer simulation of artillery battery performance, where teams were allowed different hours of sleep per night. This computer simulation projected the performance of the teams over 21 days. The first team was allowed 7 hours sleep each night, the second 6, the third 5, and the fourth team only 4 hours. Each team was to accurately fire as many rounds as they could each day. Note the results in this graph. The teams with less sleep initially showed better results on the first day of the exercise due to the fact that they had more hours of firing time. But after the first day, those teams showed a rapid drop in the number of rounds accurately fired. As sleep loss accumulated, their performance continued to steadily drop. The company which got the least amount of sleep, only 4 hours per night, fired 1/3 fewer rounds on the third day than they did on the first. And by day 21, they were able to put only 60 rounds on target. The company that slept the most hours per night put more than 300 rounds on target, and they did it in 4 hours less time. It is easy to see if we are well rested, we can accomplish much more. Dr. Michael Askin is a health psychologist at the Polyclinic Medical Center in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He describes our common fatigue-generating approach to life.
Certainly a primary one is the prevalent philosophy of doing everything to our ultimate limits, taking everything to the max, burning the candle at both ends. And whether this overcommitment is voluntary or whether it's the result of necessity, the bottom line is that it certainly creates a state of fatigue.
Dr. Askin is right. Unfortunately, modern civilization makes it possible to burn the candle at both ends. Electric lights, labor-saving devices, 24-hour systems of transportation and communication make it possible for us to be like the little Energizer rabbit. We just keep going and going and going. For example, these tourists in Las Vegas are going at it all night long. It looks like fun, but in pursuing fun at this pace, we overextend ourselves. Our civilization has accelerated the pace of life beyond the performance specifications of the human mechanism. We were not meant to keep moving at such a non-stop pace. Whether at work or play, we make a mistake to keep a pace that takes a toll on our rest and sleep. For our ancestors, it was different. There were no television programs to rivet their attention into the wee hours of the night. There were no electric lights by which to keep working once the sun went down. Our ancestors worked hard during the day, and then when the night came, they went to bed and got a good night's sleep. In fact, they averaged 20% more sleep than we do today. But what about those people who have to work unusual schedules in today's around-the-clock society? Dr. Smiley warns that these people face a special set of challenges to their natural body rhythms.
When you try and sleep during the day, when your body's more geared for action, your sleep quality is poorer and sleep duration is shorter. And on average, people who try and sleep during the day when they're working a night shift sleep about an hour and a half less per shift. And that accumulates in what we call a sleep debt.
For those who must work by night and sleep by day, Dr. Smiley has some more advice.
When you work shifts, you have to guard your sleep very carefully. You have to, for example, try and control interruptions. You know, don't answer the telephone when it rings during the day. Arrange with your family to look after things like people coming to pick up things or install telephones or whatever. You've got to really guard your sleep when you're a shift worker. You have to try and eat as well as you can. No heavy meals and alcohol just before you go to sleep, because that makes it more difficult to sleep because your digestive system is still working. You should try and keep as regular a schedule as you can. You sleep better if your body, if you have a set of rituals you go through before sleeping, a period of relaxation, doing various things, and then going to sleep at the same time of the day. That helps with the sleep pattern. So it's basically taking your sleep very seriously.
Our relationship to machines is also totally different than at any previous time in history. Operators today often watch dials, push buttons, and move small levers to do incredible amounts of work. Our machines have the ability to function for years with little downtime for maintenance. Yet these same machines require the attention of a human operator who must have 8 hours of sleep each day. Without this necessary rest, the results can be disastrous. Remember the tragic Exxon Valdez accident in Alaska? What caused that multi-billion-dollar accident? The National Transportation Safety Board, in its final report, cited the primary cause of that disastrous grounding as severe fatigue. The third mate was so tired that he failed to respond to simple, clear signals to turn the vessel back into the shipping lanes. It is very possible that he experienced what is called microsleeps. Chances are you too have experienced microsleeps. Have you ever driven down the freeway and suddenly not been able to remember the last exit you passed? This is when your tired brain goes into sleep mode for anywhere from a fraction of a second to several seconds, even though your eyes may remain open. These are always potentially dangerous events. Ron Simmons' lifelong research as a human factor psychologist with the U.S. Army and now with the Federal Aviation Administration has focused on how fatigue affects performance and what can be done about it.
The FAA funded NASA to evaluate the benefits of scheduled napping for aircrew during long flights. We were concerned that air crews during these long flights would accidentally fall asleep, and we also wanted to understand the refreshing benefits of a nap as well as the benefits to performance. In fact, the results from that research demonstrated that a 20 to 40-minute nap did refresh pilots and did not cause grogginess upon waking up. Additionally, when the data was compared to pilots who had not had naps, performance during approaches and landing was better for those pilots that had a scheduled nap. Additionally, we found that there were fewer episodes of microsleep for pilots who had had naps. The results of this research is not only beneficial to the general aviation and the aviation community, but is also just as meaningful to people who drive cars, trucks, other vehicles. It is important to understand how long you're going to be on the road and to take that scheduled nap, 20 to 40 minutes, so that you can improve your performance, remain refreshed, and arrive home safely.
While often overlooked, sleep loss has a direct effect on our relationships, both on the job and at home. Dr. J. Randall Sloop, a practicing physician in Yakima, Washington, remembers the effects of sleep loss during his residency.
During 1 year of the residency program, I was on call every third weekend, which meant that I would come in on Friday morning and be able to leave the hospital after the work was completed on Monday. That was work during the night and day during those days. On Friday, I found that the nurses were very competent, prompt to carry out your orders, and understood clearly. By Saturday, there was a real significant decrease in their skills. By Sunday, they were difficult to get along with. They didn't understand your orders and poorly carried them out. By Monday, they were absolutely impossible. Then after a good night's rest, on Tuesday, the nurses were back to their usual skill. Obviously, the problem was my fatigue and my relationship with the nurses and my ability to communicate to them eroded over that fatigue period.
Dr. Burnell Baldwin, a neurophysiologist at Wildwood Lifestyle Center and Hospital near Chattanooga, Tennessee, has studied the impact of fatigue on the family.
When we've had a good night's rest, the family looks like a team, you see, instead of a gang. The children, they look like solutions instead of problems. Fatigue shortens the fuse of life so that we're less and less patient and more fragile. We're more and more prone to violence, to quick answers, to arbitrariness, we have a tendency to overemphasize justice and not bring the arms of love into the circle of the home. So that if we're all living regular lives, it's a lot easier for us to be civil, to be courteous, to be kind, and to be understanding.
Workers in a World War II British bomber factory were working 66 hours per week. With these long hours, they became chronically irritable and quarrelsome. Accidents, absenteeism, and spoiled work steadily increased, while work performance and morale dropped lower and lower. As a desperation measure, the factory's management reduced the number of hours worked per week in spite of the demands of the war. To management's amazement, with employees working 18 hours less, production shot up by 15%. Absenteeism, spoiled work, and accidents dropped, while dispositions and morale improved. The only real solution to fatigue is rest and sleep. Yet millions turn to caffeine as a solution.
In an emergency situation, caffeine is a very effective stimulant drug. So, if you're faced with a situation where you simply have to remain awake because you have no choice in the matter, it's a life and death situation, emergency of some sort, then caffeine, and of course the less you use caffeine regularly, the more effective it will be in the emergency situation. So ideally, you ought not to use the caffeine at all from the point of view of using it in an emergency, and then when you really need it, then take it.
Dr. Mervyn Harding, Dean Emeritus and former chairman of the Pharmacology Department at Loma Linda University, describes the physiological impact of drinking caffeinated beverages.
Caffeine is a stimulant that is found in tea, coffee, and certain cola drinks, and appears to have a beneficial effect in those who are in this extreme state of fatigue. How does it work? And is it beneficial? Caffeine falls into the class of illusionary drugs. An illusion is something that you see, hear, or feel that is not real. When you're tired and you take a cup of coffee, the caffeine makes you feel rested and refreshed, and you live out this feeling. However, caffeine has no effect on the fatigue mechanisms of the body. And when the action of the drug is worn off, you are more tired than before, for you have used the last reserves of energy in the cells.
If you want to stay alert, avoid any form of alcohol. Alcohol is a sedative that exaggerates the effects of fatigue, and this sedative effect lingers long after breath alcohol levels can no longer be detected. Alcohol and fatigue
are an extremely lethal combination. Fortunately, there are concrete steps you can take to control your life, eliminate your fatigue, and feel tired no more. We call these steps fatigue busters. Fatigue buster number 1, get regular, adequate sleep. Establish a pattern of going to bed and getting up regularly. This will do wonders. Most people need 8 hours of sleep. Determine how much you need to feel rested, then make sure you get that amount every night. Remember that tonight's sleep builds tomorrow's energy. To help you achieve this goal, keep your bedroom cool, quiet, and dark. Avoid eating a heavy meal before you go to bed. Eating just before retiring disrupts your sleep. It is best to eat your main meal early in the day, either at breakfast or lunch. Relax before retiring. Spend some time in quiet conversation with your family, or do something that is calming to your soul. If you're in bed and can't sleep, get up and find a quiet and relaxing activity. Spending time in meditation or prayer will help soothe a troubled mind or spirit. If you must remain awake for a long period of time, take a nap before you get sleepy. Fatigue buster number 2, exercise at least 30 minutes every day. Psychologist Dr. Michael Askin.
I think people are often tired of hearing about exercise, but there's no doubt that exercise confers many positive effects. And two of the most important ones are an increase in your endurance to help deal with fatigue, and also the ability to deal with stress in general.
The key to proper exercise and good sleep is when you do it. Do not exercise vigorously just before you go to bed. That kind of exercise can actually prevent you from falling asleep. Instead, schedule your exercise either in the morning or the early afternoon. Fatigue buster number 3, schedule regular time for recreation and diversion. Again, listen to the wise advice of Dr. Askin.
I think another thing that we can do is make sure that we take some time to recreate and to have some diversion. We all need some time off. We need to have some fun. And I think that probably means on a daily basis as well as on a weekly basis, and certainly more than twice a year.
Take your days off seriously. Be sure to make them restful. Tackle fun new projects, but don't overdo. If you push yourself beyond your limits, you will defeat your purpose. And above all, don't let the pressures and stresses of life crowd out this important time from your schedule. It would be well for us to learn a lesson from British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who in 1941, with his nation engaged in a perilous war, told the British House of Commons,
"If we are to win this war, it will be by staying power. For this reason, we must have one holiday per week and 1 week's holiday per year."
Churchill's recommendation was voted into law, and what was wise policy for wartime England is wise advice for us today. Fatigue buster number 4, eat a wholesome diet and drink plenty of water. Like a fine-tuned, powerful engine, your body needs premium fuel to accomplish its tasks efficiently. A diet that is less than optimal can leave you feeling tired and without energy. Just as important, every one of your body functions requires water. When you drink an abundance of fresh water, you are allowing your body to do its work far more efficiently. Without adequate amounts of water in your system, wastes build up and energy goes down. Fatigue buster number 5, avoid alcohol, caffeine, and nicotine. These substances are 3 of the greatest enemies of restful sleep. All interfere with your body's natural sleep patterns. For the most restful sleep, eliminate all 3 of these substances. And don't be discouraged if after eliminating these chemicals, you feel even more tired for the first few days. That's because without these, you have unmasked your body's real fatigue. Just stay with the more healthy behavior. As you begin to get adequate sleep, you will soon begin to feel better than you have in years.
And finally, fatigue buster number 6, set healthful priorities. Good relationships with family, friends, and co-workers are crucial to our emotional health and happiness. Being alert and effective on the job is crucial to being able to provide for ourselves and those we love. Being in control of our emotions and actions is crucial to our own self-respect and personal dignity. Fatigue can damage and destroy all of these things in our lives. That's why it's important to make the kind of life changes that transform us from being tired and worn out to being rested and full of vitality. No one is immune to the damaging effects of fatigue, not even you. You are the only one who can set the priorities that will enable you to achieve the best results. That's what Dr. Daryl Gensler has done. Dr. Gensler is a noted eye surgeon in Albany, Oregon, and long ago he made the decision never to perform an operation without a full night's sleep.
Your dad's surgery went well this morning. I personally know physicians who have gone to sleep during an operation because they were so tired. And I decided a long time ago that I would never do surgery if I was fatigued in any way, even if it meant missing some fun. My hands must be absolutely steady when I am doing surgery on a patient's eye. I owe it to my God, to my patients, to their families, and to myself to be totally rested whenever I do my work on a patient's eye.
In this program, you have vividly seen how fatigue affects the brain and how in turn that affects most other aspects of our lives. When you put the 6 fatigue busters to work for you, you'll feel better, be more efficient, and make clearer decisions. Again, the 6 fatigue busters are: get regular adequate sleep, exercise daily, schedule regular times for recreation and diversion, eat a wholesome diet and drink plenty of water, avoid alcohol, caffeine, and nicotine, and set healthful priorities.
One of the issues in fatigue is understanding what your condition is before you start. For example, I remember when I was very young, 18 and 19, of driving 14 and 15 hours and not realizing how tired I was, or even checking or rechecking my level of fatigue. The same is true in the aircraft. We spend a lot of time and a lot of effort pre-flighting the aircraft to make sure the engine oil is correct, the fuel is correct, the tires and everything is functional. And we should at the same time take that time to make sure that we're ready and that our level of proficiency and capability is the same as that of the aircraft.
When you have an important task to accomplish, get in the habit of checking yourself first. We like to call it the Fatigue Busters Double Check. This is a simple tool to remind you to check yourself first to be certain you are ready. Then check your car, plane, or equipment. And don't proceed until both pass the test. Remember,
there are no governments, there are no legislatures which can pass laws or regulations which can help you control your fatigue. You can control it only by making appropriate choices which conform to the natural laws of your body.